So let me just clarify something, if I may, ma'am. The main drainage goes into one of the major underground aquifers or into Indian Spring Branch, Huntsville Spring Branch, the Tennessee River?
Yes.
All the above?
All above.
All the above, okay.
And what really impacted, what changed conditions here were those dams built in 1939.
I got you.
So when those dams, upstream and downstream of the arsenal, were built, that changed the whole hydrogeology of how the arsenal, this southern end of, right above the Tennessee River operates. So in other words, if you go above Huntsville Spring Branch, the groundwater drains fairly quickly, drains southwards towards Huntsville Spring Branch. But you get below Huntsville Spring Branch to the Tennessee River, it doesn't drain as quickly. It's a whole different geology thing.
We're fortunate, inadvertently fortunate.
Yes.
Historically inadvertently fortunate.
I'll take it though.
I agree. I mean, what works, just keep it out of the main river.
Yes.
Is there
We've been sampling the river.
any overlap in this specific area that we're looking at on the map and the DDT remediation project?
Yes. Well, no, not in this one. But yes, we are having to deal with the DDT remediation project. That is, we've got some sites that feed into that remediation area, and that do have a relationship with that consent order. Now that consent decree, they're sampling, Olin is sampling, has sampled this past summer what might be their last round. And I haven't heard. I don't know if anybody's heard. I haven't heard whether fish came up clean this time.
I've heard, and I can tell you that 40% of the sampled fish were above the consent decree level of 5 parts per million. As a matter of fact, I filed a complaint with the EPA, Department of Interior, the TVA, and also Redstone Arsenal. I talked to the Inspector General of Redstone Arsenal about this. There's some problems there. I'll tell you up front, some problems there. I'm very interested in those problems from an environmental standpoint. And I'll also tell you that it is the organization I'm a member of and some part of the scientific community that does not think our opinion that the consent decree has been met. And there's contradictory with the EPA's finding on that. And the Fish and Wildlife Service agrees with us on this. Yeah. There's still DDT in the environment there and of areas of concern. And like I said, and one of the reasons I want to be here, I'm concerned about this. I'm glad to see that the Army is taking a lead on this instead of the EPA.
We haven't taken a lead on it yet. Here's what's going to happen. The
Okay.
consent decree, right now, if that fish met what EPA or what that consent decree says is the cleanup numbers, cleanup goals, Olin's done. They have 7 years, they sample again. If that comes up on it, they walk away. What happens at that point is it's very likely that the Army is going to be asked to do any more work out there that needs to be done. So we're tracking that. We sit on the Olin review panel. We're a voting member of that review panel, the Army is. And we sit on those meetings, and they happen semi-annually, twice a year. We got one coming up, I think, this fall, in November. And so we're tracking that, and we totally agree with you that consent decree that was a 1983 consent decree. That was the very early days of surplus, and it was quite frankly, a poorly designed cleanup. The goals were poorly defined. Today, those goals we couldn't use them as goals. They would not satisfy the state or EPA at this point in time. We tried to use that same type of goals that Olin used. At the time, they were very progressive because these were early cleanup days. Early environmental regulations had just come in line. RCRA came along in 1976. CERCLA was 1984 or 1980. Maybe 1984. So you've got these environmental regulations that were just coming online at the time that Olin was told to get out there and clean it up. Now Olin spent a ton of money. It was an $83 million cleanup in the early 80s. That was a significant dollar amount spent on cleanup action out here. But it did leave a lot of DDT residue still in place along the Huntsville Spring Branch Indian Creek system. And we know that. We know that. We're tracking it. We're watching to see what's going on with that consent decree. We can't impact it because it was signed by a federal judge. So until it's released to the federal judge and all that, the legal aspects of that is closed out. We, like everybody else, like Fish and Wildlife and everybody else, is sitting and watching. And seeing what's going to happen there. We've got a site that, or 2 or 3 sites that butt up against it just north of that area that feed into it. And one of our sites is the actual DDT manufacturing facility. Because what Olin cleaned up was the drainage area where their wastes were draining into, where it drained into the Huntsville Spring Branch, flowed along Huntsville Spring Branch to the Indian Creek, and flowed south from the Indian Creek into the Tennessee River. And then that's where the city of Triana was getting hold of it out there. So we are cleaning up. As a matter of fact, we're right in the middle or tail end of sampling, doing our sampling investigation of that manufacturing facility, the DDT manufacturing facility. And so that we are due to turn that RFI in the next 2 months, I think. Any problem?
That's hard to do last month.
Okay, so we're close to turning that into the state. And then we'll work with the state on whether they think we've got it, investigation nailed down. And so we conceivably could be starting with some cleanup actions on the production facility in about a year and a half. And that production facility is nasty. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It is a mess. And it's probably one of the worst sites on Redstone Arsenal. And it is a very high dollar site that we will have to be going out and cleaning up a lot of solvents in the groundwater, chlorobenzene, which is part of the DDT manufacturing process. We've got DDT pesticides, high levels in the soils out there. Shoot, we even got some DDT in the groundwater. That's amazing. You know, you never find DDT in groundwater, yet we've got it at that site because the values are so high, right above the water table. And so, you know, we're tracking that, we're working that one. And so that, once we get that cleaned up, hopefully that will help significantly with the Huntsville Spring Branch Indian Creek areas. But, you know, we've got some issues with who's going to do the maintenance of all those sheet piling that was Olin put in to reroute the creeks and stuff up there. So it looks like Army's going to be
Trying to get ahead of it.
we're going to be asked to do the maintenance of the system that Olin built out there. And that will be, like I said, legally, we can't address it now, but after that 7-year mark, if the cleanup, if the fish meet the requirements of the consent order now, and in 7 years, the Army takes over at that 7-year mark and starts maintaining all the systems that Olin put in place and possibly start doing some more sampling and additional cleanup out there.
So it's safe to say we're not satisfied with the current condition, and that we'll continue to press to make sure.
Outstanding, Colonel, outstanding.
So we're on your team because
Yes, sir.
we live, our workforce lives in our community, and we want to do the right thing by our workforce.
There's a good arsenal. No, that's just the
Is ADM here tonight?
Who?
ADM?
Another one? Another one?
Why are they not?
Another one?
One representative should be
Here we go.
here at every
Let's go
present.
Spring Branches.
They're usually out on the arsenal just about every day. I don't know why they're not here.
Indian Creek up there, flows down here to the Tennessee River. This is the Tennessee River, triangles right there. See the triangles right there. So these were the people that were getting the PPC and the fabric issues. Okay, that filed a lawsuit in this Olin, and that lawsuit was what initiated the consent order for Olin to come and do the cleanup. Olin rerouted this, the Huntsville Spring Branch flowed down this direction. It originally went up sort of like this, up here, and then Olin redirected it. And so what you've got is you've got a DDT cell right there, covered in the creek, the old creek. Creek beds very high DDT levels in there. And then, so it's primarily right in here for the consent order, work that Olin did. Our site is there, is that right, Clint?
Yes, ma'am.
Right here. That was the manufacturing facility right in that area. One more? Okay, this was where we were. All right. So I told you about we're doing the surface media separate from groundwater. Both of them are going on at the same time. So while we're cleaning up the surface medium, we're also investigating groundwater. Okay, so we're doing them concurrent, the investigations concurrently. We're doing quite a lot of surface media cleanups. Haven't done nearly as many groundwater cleanups. We've done several heating systems. I don't know if you've heard about our heating system, our ERH, enhanced resistant heating systems. We've got very high levels of TCU in the surface water and the surface medium and groundwater. And so on our very, very worst sites, we're basically heating it up out of the soil. We've tried steam, acetylene steam. We tried soil vapor extraction, various other technologies that just didn't work in our tight clays. But what does work is we're able to get electrons spread out fairly evenly all throughout the tight clay. And when we heat that up, then the TCU can pull the solvents out of the soils. And that has been very, very effective. It costs a lot, but it's very effective. So we only use it where we absolutely must use it. First time we turned it on, we were worried we were going to brown out all of Huntsville. But we didn't. So we were very happy about that because we were nervous because of the tornado that came through a few years ago, and all that, all the electrical system, problems with the electrical system after that tornado. So we were holding our breath when we first turned that very first heating system on. What was it, a year later? You recall? About a year later. We turned the very first heating system on. We held our breath for about 30 minutes. Waiting to see if we're going to ban on Huntsville. But we didn't. We did that. And that site's clean. We're closing it out. All right, next one. Okay, here's a cartoon of our bedrock. And, like I said, here's how it looks, the top of the surface here. And it can be difficult. And this is fairly flat. In some cases, there's more relief than what we're showing here. But as you can see, we'll have these areas, that drain into the soil. What we're doing is we're hitting those areas where you've got contamination. Here's one right there. We hit it down really hard and heated all the solvents up out of that soil. Let's put caps where we have to. So that's some of our technology that we're using. I told you about the enhanced resistant heating. Dig and haul. We use dig and haul a lot. It's low tech, but hey, it works great for metals, and it works great for fluoride. Fluoride's one that you don't usually find it in the soil, but because of our conditions here, we find it in the soil. So we're digging for fluoride. Nobody digs for fluoride except for Redstone. We dig for fluoride. Because typically it's very soluble and it just runs through the soil into the groundwater and is gone. Well, at Redstone, it's bound with a polymer that they used, Thiokol used when they were doing the R&D and the manufacturing of solid rocket motor propellant for years. And so it gets in our tight clay and with that polymer, and the chloride will sit in the soil in certain locations. And so we dig that up, take it to a treatment facility.